Okay, hi everyone. We are talking about a Wolfram language design issue to do with making rafts, as we call them, to be connected to entities. So let's take a look at a basic case here. Okay, we have an entity blob for London.
And so essentially, as soon as you type the open bracket, this interface comes up. So the template box, and there's an attached cell there. And it's been populated with all the things you could query here. So for example, there's just information about the entity, such as property count, data set of properties, etc. And then there are the properties themselves.
Okay. Okay. All right.
Go on.
I mean, how are we sorting these properties, for example? This is fairly stupid sorting. So I mean, but didn't we have to solve that problem, Alan, for documentation? Is Alan here? I hope
he
so.
Is. If you're muted, Alan, if you're replying.
Could somebody ping Alan? Maybe he's.
Oh, he says he's having an audio issue. Yeah.
Okay. Right. Okay.
And if you just wanted to remove this interface, then you could type backspace, you could type escape, which would get rid of it, or in an empty field, you could type backspace, and then it sort of selects the entire template blob and dismisses the attached cell, and then you can just delete it. To get it back again, if you put the insertion point within the brackets, you get that little, if you click on that little magnifying Raft, then you'd get the interface. And if you hover over the brackets, you'd get the same thing. I think that there are a few kind of quirks and questions I've put throughout here. I think it probably makes sense to circle back to those at the end.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So the thing okay.
Okay. So yeah, the idea is that obviously in this state, there's no filtering going on. And you can just scroll down that list of properties if you just kind of want to see what's there and explore it, to sort of see what things there are for cities, for example. One of the things we talked about previously was making sure that people knew this was a I'm going to say at the moment natural language-esque search. I'll explain that a bit later, but in other words, it's not just kind of string matching. So that's why I've italicized those properties at the top, because property count is really just referring to the string, property count, etc. Whereas the properties themselves actually have common names as well as the canonical ones.
Okay. By the way, missing property values sounds like a lost and found. I mean, it should say those are properties missing for this entity or something. So I'm saying.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. I should say that there's also, again, we talked about this specifically, previously, including the list of missing property values there. But people have brought up kind of like, very significant concerns about whether that can actually be implemented. Again, it might be best to circle back to that.
Well, I understand. Well, I understand. In what sense? What can be implemented?
Whether we can know which property values are missing in this way.
But I thought we went through this. We talked about the engineering of this. We simply have a vector. One of the properties of this entity is which properties are missing.
But that means having to look that up.
No, it does not. It means pre-computing that.
So, for example, chemistry data has 200,000 entities, if I'm remembering right. Yep. And I just checked, and maybe this is an overcount, but almost 1,000 properties.
Okay, so great. I already told you how to do this engineering.
No, you didn't, because I wasn't in that meeting.
Okay, you just make a bit field. You got
1,000. And how do you populate that bit field?
You do the computation.
And that's going to take forever.
Well, we do it once.
But then, what if there's a fast patch?
We have to deal with that. Okay.
And we're doing it once for the front end? And if so, then that's not going to coincide with the alpha release cycle.
Okay.
Which means,
you know what? These are engineering details which we can certainly solve. We're not going to not have this feature and have people be trying to look up things that aren't there because we couldn't solve the engineering problem. We can solve this engineering problem.
but it's perfectly legitimate for properties to have a missing value, and that can even be informative.
Of course, but we don't want time wasted by people continually asking for things which aren't there. So, I mean, you know, look, in the case of chemistry, for example, I mean, that you're taking a corner case. Let's take countries, for example. You know, most properties will be there. You're right that to know that some property is missing, like a literacy rate is missing, is worth knowing. Now, maybe with hierarchical entities, there will be less of an issue, but I don't want it, you know, notable artworks of an astronaut are missing all the time. Well, presumably. Is Michael here? Is anybody who would like to comment on hierarchical entities here?
I don't think this will help solving the problem, because I don't think Jeremy speaks about the ones that come from a half-type mismatch, but from the ones that are just not there for various reasons.
Okay. Well, how many are just not there for various reasons?
This really depends on the entity type and the property.
Okay, well, fine. But okay, so we'll do the best we can at giving this kind of interface. And if there's some case where we can't give this interface, then we won't give this interface. But when we can give it, we will give it. And we're not going to just say, because there's a corner case where we can't give it, we're going to give up on everything. Seems straightforward.
I'm sorry, when you say this interface, you mean whether or not you're showing a filtered list of properties, or whether
Yes.
or not you're showing the interface that Noah is showing at all?
No.
Surely you mean the former, right?
Yeah, a filtered list of properties.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
You know, we don't want gobs of properties that are all missing. Okay. That's absolutely absurd. Obviously, we don't do this. Obviously, we have a property that is the list of properties that are available. Okay. And if there's a further engineering problem, you can come back to me and we'll try and solve it. And if there are cases where we can't do it, there are cases where we can't do it. Okay, what's next here?
So if you just, continue to open the sections. So then the actual search itself. So there are essentially three searches that you can do here. One is a substring search over common and canonical property names, which is essentially the default one that's performed. You can extend that to be a natural language search.
Nobody's ever going to figure this out. Nobody's ever going to figure this out.
Open the sections, you'll see. So, okay, so you just start typing in, right? Depending on how fast we can implement this, either this happens continuously or there's a short pause, but it's basically doing a substring search on, you know, the common and the canonical names of all those properties. And it's giving you the filtered list. You then get that button at the bottom that says extend search. If you click on that, it'll essentially do an alpha search. So for example, I think that is actually a real example there. So in other words, when you search pop by just doing, you know, a substring search on common and canonical names, it won't find households. But if you go and search alpha, it will return households in that example.
What do you mean by search alpha? What is it actually doing?
Can someone else chime in?
There's an API already that I believe, I don't have it at the top of my head. You give it the entity type and a linguistic, and it returns all the properties. I think it actually returns all properties that match that linguistic, but it moves the ones that match the entity type to the top. Or maybe it's just returning, maybe it doesn't know about the entity type and that filtering is done on the client. Actually, now that I think about it, I think that's how it works. But anyway, there is an API for getting all the properties that match a linguistic.
But a linguistic can be a substring?
No.
Imagine the weight for a mass property.
Say it again?
Searching for weight when you mean mass.
So the practical example, which already works and has worked for a long time, is create an entity like for a city or something, and then control equal in in the first argument and type in children, and you'll see lots of hits that are like children but don't literally have the word children in it.
So you're saying, what are you saying? You're saying
So like, yeah.
Okay, and now
Yep, that's fine.
And now what do I
Now
do?
open square brackets.
Yep.
And control equal children.
I don't think
Now,
anybody knows this works.
Well, you knew it worked about 3 weeks ago because I showed you this 3 weeks ago and you thought it was amazing.
Yeah, but and I forgot that it worked.
And of course it was a feature you commissioned like 4 years ago.
What's that? And what's that? What's that? What the heck is that?
The short answer is not the default. So
what are you
that's what I was saying, where it returns all the properties and then the client filters and sorts.
I understand. What it did was clearly wrong, right? What it did was clearly wrong. It's given me an autocomplete. I said, choose one of the members of the autocomplete. It said that was wrong. That's clearly wrong. How did that happen? Is that a bug? What is going on there?
Well, I think that I'm aware of, there are two possibilities, and someone from the office side should correct me if there are more, but one possibility is some of those entity properties just aren't valid for that particular entity type. And there's been some discussion around that. I don't think anyone quite realized that was an issue, and that may be something that we're on the path to fixing. I'm a little unclear about that. So that's issue number one. Issue number two.
So wait a minute. That was basically a bug.
I would classify it as a bug. I'm not 100% certain if everyone on the office side agrees or not.
Well, so can we get clarity on that, please? Who is relevant? Jeremy?
No, I thought this was client side. So I'm going to disagree. I'm going to disagree about alpha side unless I'm not remembering all the history.
Well, and I'm not
gone wrong here. So how are we going to fix it? What are
I think the missing handshake is that the properties were not filtered by the entity type that is available for the entity. This is the step that hasn't happened on the front end.
That's for the front end to do rather than for alpha to do?
That's right, because the front end doesn't know the entity type. So the front end is sorting all the country properties to the top.
From looking in the boxes.
Yep. The front end is sorting all the country ones to the top. And what you were saying is that it should not just sort them to the top, but actually delete the ones that are not country
like average
properties.
litter size.
Right.
God, this is embarrassing. How did that happen? Where did the brain disconnection happen that caused average litter size to be left here? Well, okay, it's a bug. We can fix it.
Well, I mean, Stephen, look, that kind of statement is not fair. You cherry pick one example that looks crazy, and you have no idea what was actually tried by the people who developed or tested this.
Okay,
and for a feature that you didn't even remember existed when you commissioned it.
Yes. Well, that's a separate problem that I didn't remember it existed. Maybe I tried it 3 times and it failed 3 times for me, so I gave up.
Not in my presence.
No, I know. Previously. Anyway, we'll fix this bug. But that
So that would be one issue is the entity type just isn't even appropriate for that particular sorry, the entity property isn't appropriate for the entity type. And then the other issue is the one that we were talking about earlier, which is that you may have a valid entity property, but it's missing for this specific entity.
yes,
Which, yeah,
that's a different thing from this. Well,
yeah.
I mean, first thing is to fix this bug. Okay, so the basic point you're making here. Oh boy, it's pretty hackalola. You know, the fact that there are these multiple pieces to this, and how are we ranking the results?
Okay, so something else to understand about this interface is that think about what you can do while you're typing key by key. It really doesn't make sense to do to do some kind of more profound search when you haven't even necessarily finished typing a word.
Sure, absolutely.
And so what Noah is considering here is, can we get some useful stuff key by key, but then can we take advantage of the more powerful search that we have, and how would we?
It's a reasonable solution to that thing, where there's no point in kicking off the more powerful thing. It's just going to be garbage.
Yeah,
likely.
And I mean, there is a question there that says, do we even give the option to perform the natural language search, or is it, it might be sufficient just to do?
I don't think it is. I don't think it is. I mean, it would be nice if we could show people that they could do the natural language thing by typing control equals in that field.
But then, I mean, why have you've got two interfaces that are then kind of trying to do the same thing?
Well, which place you want to start from.
The intent is for this proposed interface to just completely replace any need to do control equal.
Okay. And I don't know how
I don't think it's going to succeed at that. I don't think it's going to succeed. I think there are enough cases where substring isn't going to cut it.
And so, okay, sorry, just to circle back a second then, you are not keen on how this is being handled here with the extended search button.
I mean, that is exactly the problem the extended search button solves.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that's a possibility. I'm just saying substring alone is not going to solve it. But substring with the extended search possibly is solving it. Okay, the question I was trying to ask Alan before is, what is a good ordering of these properties? Because this ordering is pretty stupid. And do we already have an ordering that we made for the documentation for each entity type?
No, we have a few types that I think we've split things into some subcategories, but for many of them, either they're too small to be worth trying to sort. We could go back through and we could do a better ordering.
Because
presumably that's something that it doesn't.
Especially in this case here, where it isn't even alphabetical by what you see, which drives me crazy. I mean, that's a thing where when I look at properties, when I see the property list and it's not alphabetical by what I see, it just drives me.
They're alphabetical by the canonical name rather than the common name.
Right. Which is, so we have to have a curated list here.
I mean, do we want to consider having things that are grouped more kind of property class wise?
Well, there's no point in grouping
subsections.
No.
Yeah, fair enough. We're not going to have that many that they need to.
But also, they may have a phone number. I mean, things like countries have hundreds, but we should start off with the very popular ones. Maybe we should have the popular ones at the top. Then we should have things grouped in some way, repeating the popular ones. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, we really are encouraging people to use the search here. And the idea of listing them all before you've typed anything in is is if someone wants to explore it. And so if you had them alphabetically arranged by common name, in other words, by what's shown, that doesn't seem bad to me.
No, it's not hopeless. I agree. In some cases, there's a small number, but in some other cases, there are hundreds. All right, let's keep looking.
Yeah, I mean, it's really easy to get into 500 or more properties, and the curation of the sub list curation aside, there's no useful exploring of the list that size.
So what I'm pointing out here is that as I say, that this new interface must not impede what happens currently, direct input of a string argument. So if you just know what you want,
yeah, that's good.
Then yeah, it just gets rid of it. I think that was John's idea. Okay, this is just saying, I mean, this should be fairly obvious. Left and right keys are moving in the input field, and up and down arrow keys are highlighting, up and down in that list.
Okay.
Yeah, just including it for completeness. Okay, so attachment points then. So this is, where we could use this interface. And so there are kind of 4 places that we're considering at the moment. So there's the one that we've seen above, which is actually on, a typeset entity blob. And this is, specifically when you open the bracket after one, there's obviously where it's not typeset. There's a little bit more to this, which is we'd have to check if the entity type is valid. When you type that open bracket, for example, there I put cities right instead of city, so we wouldn't show anything in that case. And then for the other way around, where you've got the type right. And then the sort of the specific entity is either wrong or just, for example, I put a hash there. Then we can't do the missing filtering, obviously.
Noah, would we not show anything, or would we still show the entity information subsets?
Oh, well, it wouldn't work. Well, no, but it could be like a hash or something, couldn't it? Or
it could be a programmatic thing.
Exactly. No, good idea. Yes. Yeah.
What about, are you going to talk about hovering over the actual entity? What happens if I just hover over the entity?
The same as now, I would say. It's useful to get the just accept that. Click the tick.
Check it. Yeah, check the check.
Yeah. Right, there we go. Now it gives you the input form, which I think is useful.
I understand that, but what about a raft that allows you to ask for that allows you to see what properties there are and allows you to get the data set that corresponds to the data that we know for that entity?
Right. So if you scroll up to the very top quickly, there was the are you talking about like all the way up? Right there. With the little magnifying glass. Sorry, now sort of yeah. Are you talking about that where you're hovering over?
Yes, but I don't want the square brackets there. I want that without the square brackets. I want to be able to find properties of an entity without having square brackets.
Yeah.
We get in the way of the input form, which I think is quite useful.
The input form is worth having, but we can have both things. We can have a raft that has the input form and has the ability to find out properties. I really think it's an important thing for discovery of this.
Okay. We can, I can mock that up.
I don't think that such a thing should be able to insert code or modify code.
I am not so keen on this one because I use entities a lot for labeling of things, and that's definitely a scenario where I don't want this to happen.
Sorry, entities for labeling.
In plots, points, kind of. I want call outs, tooltips. I don't want to see the properties.
Well, okay. So, is there any possibility in input form we could have this, but not an output form? John, that would be a question.
Yeah. I mean, technically, yes. We already do things input versus output. Remember, if you evaluate the France entity there, the word country disappears on output. It's just like that. It's templates, we can change the boxes, it's no big deal.
I see. Okay, so we could do that. So we could do a raft on an input, but not output.
Yeah.
Okay, that would be better.
Okay. All right.
And so then, hang on, then when you click on that, it's going to insert both the square brackets and the template box.
That's
Just to
the idea.
confirm. Yeah.
But
okay, cool.
but what I'm suggesting is that such mouse overs should not go about disturbing the code in place. You could maybe use
Sure.
them for inspection, put something on the clipboard, maybe stuff like that. But it shouldn't. You shouldn't be able to accidentally click somewhere and unwittingly corrupt your code.
Well, but we're adding to the code like an autocomplete.
Right, but the code was maybe already working, and then it blindly adds a thing which breaks it.
But that's true of autocomplete in general, isn't it?
No. In autocomplete, your caret is there and you're typing, so you're clearly editing the code. When you're mousing over something, you're not clearly editing the code.
Right. You're saying that it should be purely, a raft is purely annotatory.
Yes.
Never. Yeah. Okay, I agree with that.
Yeah, okay, so we can do it after implicit entities as well. There's a question there that we can circle back to. Okay, so inside an entity class filter list, in this case, we would only show the properties, not the entity information. And this happens when you open the curly braces of the second argument there to add the filter, or after you've typed a comma.
Okay.
So there's the comma example. So I think this is probably not a version 1 feature, but you did sort of mention it specifically. So I thought I'd just mock something up. Some properties can be dated. So for example, like, population. And so I think the way we would do this, we could either use like a date setting interface or maybe a natural language interface. I'm not sure, neither of which
the problem is that we almost never have things in most properties. If there is a date, it is by year. And so an actual date interface that allows you to set January 7th or something wouldn't be the right thing.
Right. Okay.
I like the iconography though. But it could just, for things which are granular by year, it can just bring up a thing where you type in the year.
Sure. Yes, I guess so. That's the thing that we would have to kind of figure out and discuss. But I suppose just the way of getting to that and showing that there are dated properties. I suppose that's what I'm showing.
No, I like that. I think that's basically a good idea.
Okay. Again, I think this perhaps isn't a version 1 feature, but yeah. Okay, so I guess we should circle back to the questions. If you open that section, then they linked back into the text. So.
Okay, what happens when the insertion point leaves the search field?
Yeah, so if you click on so this is just kind of like a quirk of this, which is that the left and right keys, if you kind of hit the edge of the field, the input, the insertion point is confined to the field, but you could get out of it by hitting backspace, which is going to select the whole thing, and then the idea is that you'd hit it again to delete it. But from that state, where the whole template box is selected, you could just hit the left or right key or click away, and it's going to leave that template box there. So the question is, if the insertion point leaves that template box, should it just be deleted entirely? And so you just be left with a pair of empty brackets?
I would think so.
Just a slightly odd case.
I would think so.
And yes, that's the answer that I proposed as well. So you and I are in agreement, Stephen.
Okay. Missing property values, we just talked about that.
Yeah. And we talked about, is natural language search even necessary?
Well, I think we're saying yes.
Yeah.
We're saying this is a good thing to try. We don't know. I don't know completely how it will work.
Well, actually, okay, hang on, because a previous version of this was just doing the natural language search. And the idea is that therefore you really do need the pause and typing, right? So you'd type, you'd pause, then it would do the natural language search. What if we combined both? What if we just did both? So, the pause and typing, it would have to be a slightly larger pause, I guess, because it's actually going to have to go off to alpha, but it would be combining, it would just be doing both steps at once, right? So
what would it look like? So it would, as you type each letter, things would change around. And then when you stop typing, things would change again 2 seconds later.
No. I think we'd have to be consistent. So in other words, you'd be typing and nothing would change, as in that image at the top left there. As you see, that's just the default list that hasn't been filtered.
That will be
yet.
super confusing. That will be super confusing. By the time that thing is extruded after you're typing, it's got to change as you type, in my opinion, just like autocomplete. If autocomplete didn't change until you finished typing, it will be super confusing.
I mean, okay. I'm willing to accept that. I think it depends how long the pause is, but
I think the only way that works is if we're willing to show the second list beside the first list, and that seems like it has its own problems.
For which one?
Well, so I mean, there's the string submatch, and then there's the, what was found by the extended search.
Sure, but they're just combined.
And so right now it's, basically the string, when you click extended search, I believe, Noah, correct me if I'm wrong, that the extended search results effectively replace the string.
No. They are added to the top of the list, right?
Okay,
so for example, households there was just added at the top. The reason that they were added at the top is because presumably you already saw the results and you weren't happy with them, and then you decided to do an extended search. I think if we were combining them and doing both together, we'd have to come up with a better ranking algorithm. But no, the idea is that it's combining, search over canonical names, search over common names, and then the natural language search as well into one list.
I think that if it's easy to implement, you should try this. I'm not sure what's going to happen. Okay. Because I think it's across different entities with very different numbers of properties, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I just don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, so another issue with the asynchronous search is if the new results pop in at the top, then it will replace the thing that is currently selected, which means you might have kind of a race condition where
Why don't you put it in the bottom? Why don't you put the new things at the bottom, like right where the extend search thing is?
I think if that's being populated automatically, then that would be odd.
It's not being. No, we're saying we only populate when you press extend search.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Okay.
And then what I would do, look.
I do like the general idea of you either have the extend search control or you have the extend search results.
Exactly.
And okay. that makes it clear that there is nothing more to do, that it was done automatically for you.
Right. So listen, I've got 2 suggestions. First of all, I think this missing section should be closed up by default. And I think additional properties for this entity type or something.
As the label for the button, you mean?
Yeah. Properties missing for this specific entity. Maybe is a possible thing. And then that opens up and you can get down to all of those ones. That's closed. And I should think it should say properties missing, and that should give a number of properties that are missing, 17 or something, whatever it is, right? So you kind of know if it says, 1 or something, or 0, it shouldn't put it up there at all. But with some number there. Then underneath that, it says extend search. You press extend search, and it just, produces more properties there. I would even make a different suggestion. Put the missing properties underneath extend search. So both of them are extruders. So missing properties, you open it up and boom, it's got a bunch of properties. Extend search, you press it and boom, it's putting in a bunch of properties. See what I'm saying?
Yes. I think I'd have to mock it up to kind of see. So are you envisaging that it would get taller, the whole raft, or that it would kind of replace what was there?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I was thinking about that same issue, and I would have to think a bit more about it. Its solution is not obvious.
Okay, but my suggestion is you've got the initial things at the top that were gotten by the substring search. Then you've got the extend search, and it will add more things there. Okay, probably not very many most of the time. And then after that, you've got these missing ones, which you can open up and see. I think this will work.
I would still like to see the missing properties by default, just to see that I found something, even if it's missing.
Look, if you find nothing, okay, if you're finding nothing non-missing, then you could open up that section. You just don't want a big pile of missing properties and then the extend search that has very valid properties that then are underneath the missing properties. It's just going to look stupid. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Sorry, just to confirm, you're saying underneath.
I mean that we do this.
That is,
yeah, go ahead.
I know, but I just want to make sure you know that it's not. It's sort of attached to the bottom. It's not actually in the list, right?
What is?
The extend search button.
Okay,
it's
fine.
like a docked cell on the bottom.
Then attach to the bottom a missing properties thing and have that be an extender too.
Well, so Noah's concern, at least maybe some other things too, but at least about keyboard navigability, and that's I think that I'm thinking about that too, Noah, and I think we just have to take that offline and think about it a bit.
Okay, cool.
All right, I like this. This is good. Now, what about the I need to go in a second here, but what about the stuff where we're seeing actual properties of the entity, as opposed to just the ability to get properties? Are we imagining we're going to have any kind of card effectively that represents, that gives some summary of the entity?
So that's, I mean, first of all, that wasn't kind of in the mission statement of what we were doing here at all, including when we discussed it initially. But in thinking about, the mouse over question we were talking a bit earlier, I think that there is some validity to the notion of thinking about this populating a mouse over, and a bit like what we did, or what was done in Excel with the alpha properties in Excel, that had a card that came up and you could scroll through and such, and it didn't have a, it wasn't a complete list of properties, but it was a basic list of properties.
Maybe we should use the exact stuff. I mean, that we created there. Yeah.
We also do have that shorter list in information of an entity, gives a curated subset of
good
data.
Well, I'd like that. I think that'll be great to have a raft that has some of that information, because like you see London. Okay, well, is it London, Ontario? Is it London, UK? What is it? Some basic information would be very useful. And the information, we already did this. We already did the.
But I would suggest that we don't want any of that in the, I'm writing code interface. That would just be strictly in the hover, give me some information interface.
What's the difference? Oh, yeah. I mean, it will be a raft type thing here.
Yes.
Yeah. And Michael,
so that raft would have the input form, essentially that little information pane, and if there wasn't an open close bracket after it, the little magnifying glass to browse the properties. So essentially, there'd be three things in that raft then. Okay.
Yes. By the way, that flag is too big. Small point. Michael, would you want these rafts to come up in output form?
I would say no. Because if I wanted to do something, I would anyway click in the whole output cell, which would make it an input cell.
Maybe. All right. So provisionally not.
I would be concerned that we have legacy uses of it that if it did start coming up in output form, we'd have to go back and
Yeah, I
fix
kind
a
of
number of
agree with you.
things.
I kind of agree with you. All right. Well, good stuff. Any other questions that we need to cover right now?
There was one minor thing about if it's an implicit entity, it can take the argument entities. So we just want to include that in the in the entity information list. Like they're there, yeah, on screen. You just had it. You just scroll past it. So here, yeah, that can actually take entities. So presumably we should. It just seems a bit odd to add entities as a query to an entity, and so that's why I wanted to check. Should we add it to that top list?
Only in certain cases, right? Only in the case where this is a property class. I mean, entity class.
Right. Yeah. I think Noah's just asking, the list of 4 entity information properties in this particular scenario. Do we make it 5 in this case?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. In the case where it's it's an entity class.
Well, it's not an entity class. It's just an implicit entity.
But in that case,
yeah.
in the case where it isn't an explicit entity, where saying entities wouldn't make any sense.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
because this presumably is if I take this, this is a mock-up, so I can't do it. But if I took that and I said entity list of this thing, I would get a list of entities, and that's what entities is doing. The entity's property is doing the same thing.
I see. Okay.
This looks good. This is going to be very nice. This is going to be very useful. Okay, if there's nothing else here, we should wrap it up. And thank you very much.
Yeah,
okay.
not for me.
Okay. Okay. See you all soon.